I looked at the woman who had helped my wife slide off her buddy. What the hell is wrong with you, Dee? I thought you were our friend. We talked about what it would mean if a spouse cheated. We were all in agreement, and now this. Oh, he's famous. So it's okay. You'll get over it quickly. I always thought you were a bit stupid, but I underestimated your idiocy. By a wide margin. I want you to do one thing for me. Don't ever talk to me again. Ever again. You wouldn't like it if you did. If I find myself in the water and I go down for the third time and you walk by, keep going. I'd rather die. Now get away from me. It was evident that she was not herself. I had never come close to talking to someone in our circle like that. I turned and started to stalk toward the door when I was intercepted by a huge bouncer. Is the night over already? Get out of my way, he smirked. Oh, drunk and belligerent. I think for everyone's sake, you should just turn around and go back to your table. Have some drinks. I'll make sure they're on the house. I glared at him until he started to get a little nervous. How much is he paying you to intervene? Hopefully a lot, because if you don't get out of my way right this damn minute, you're going to need every penny. His eyes widened and he pouted slightly. You're not going to catch me. I'll wipe the floor on your sorry ass and not break a sweat. More than likely, but you should know something. I don't fight fair and I don't forgive. If you beat me, be sure to finish me off, because when I come to my senses, I'm coming for you. You'll have to think twice before you go dark for the rest of your life. Maybe I'll just hire a couple guys and be 1,000 miles away from you when it happens. Maybe I'll pay them a little extra to make sure your career as a security guard at the club is over. If I can't get to you, then, are you married? Parents? You'll be sick every time you look at them when I'm done. So you have a choice. Move. He didn't notice as he stepped back. Funny thing is, he was at least 65 tall and weighed about 300. I had 5'11 and 180 in me, and I was willing to bet his fat-to-muscle ratio was much better than mine. I had something he didn't. Pure, unadulterated nuclear rage. It couldn't be beaten. I was almost to the door when someone grabbed my arm. I clutched at the arm and spun in place, pulling the person holding me away. When I realized it was Janie, I let her go. I was about to walk away when she grabbed my leg. Don't do this. Think about your kids. I looked at her with all the contempt I was capable of. You mean like she did when she slipped out the back door with that asshole? As for family, I don't have any anymore. I'll always be good to my kids, unlike that bitch who was my wife. Maybe I'll file for custody in the divorce. After all, her actions today prove she's an unfit mother. She let go of him and covered her mouth with her hand. I made it to the elevator before another volley rang out. Bob, think about this. Are you really going to throw away 10 years because of one night? I looked at my former friend and his gang. I didn't throw away a damn thing. She's the one who threw it all away. Look me in the eye and tell me you think what she did was acceptable. Each of you assholes, look at me. I want each of you to tell me that you don't think what she did was so bad and that if that's what your wife did, it would be okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Harry. That ship has sailed. You do know she's seeing him again, don't you? Harry cast a glance at Erica, and she hung her head and walked back to the clubhouse. The others were yelling, mostly at each other, and I took the opportunity to slip into the elevator. It didn't take me long to pack. I left Linda's shit where it was. If she wanted it, she could come and get it. I was discharged 30 minutes later and had already reached the parking lot when I heard them. Apparently, my friends were waiting for me. They started arguing and Eric stood in front of my car door. You have until I turn this thing on to get out of my way. Anyone who doesn't will be scattered across the parking lot. Get moving, now. You'll listen to us. That was all he had time to say before I rammed my fist into his stomach. None of them were fighters, and none of them had learned how to defend themselves. But I had, because when I was a teenager I had a temper and got into a lot of fights. I got in trouble with the law a couple of times because of that, and when it came to counseling or juvie, I attended a few sessions. It really helped me with my anger control issues. I still lost my temper, but I rarely lost control. And right now, I didn't care. I walked over and unlocked my door, looking back at them. I put it in gear and stepped on the gas, ripping forward with a screech of tires. They scattered like quail. I had no idea where I was going or what I was going to do when I got there. She'd been gone for almost an hour by then, so she was probably already having fun with him. My first inclination was to find them and leave them both in a pool of blood, but I doubted that would happen for a number of reasons. The guy was #1 on the local football team, and they pinned their hopes of a winning season this year, maybe even a championship, on his abilities. He had just signed a 3-year contract worth $106 million on top of the millions he had already made. His house will probably be locked up tighter than Fort Knox. Besides, I wasn't a martial arts expert or a former Navy SEAL. I was just a guy. A guy in decent shape, but still just a guy. I didn't have access to unlimited wealth or friends in high or low circles. I was sitting at a stoplight, and then it hit me. There was something I could do, and now was the time to start doing it. I realized that if I went forward, there would be no turning back. I stopped in front of a late-night diner that advertised free Wi-Fi. Before I started, I thought about my plan. If I wanted revenge, social media was the most appropriate way to go about it. Linda had every imaginable and unthinkable account: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even something called TikTok. I wasn't an IT nerd. I could barely get online, but I knew someone who could. My niece. She had just turned 18 and had 4 scholarship offers, 2 from Ivy League schools and 2 from technical colleges on both coasts. I called her, and she was very surprised to hear from me so late, but when I told her I would give her $500 if she would come and help me, she was very interested. I was about to tell her where I was when I heard a ping. "Got it, Unc. We'll be there in 7 minutes." I wondered who that "we" was, but as long as she was walking, I didn't care. While I waited, I went inside and asked the waitress for a quiet booth as far away from people as possible. Then I surprised her. "You close at midnight, don't you?" She nodded. "Tell me how many customers you'll have from the time you close and how much you need to tip." While you're thinking, let me tell you that 2 friends of mine are coming over soon, and I'd like the place to be as crowded as possible. Tell the owner I'll make up for lost profits if he'll let us sit here and work for an hour or two. And another 200 for you, if you bring sodas and coffee. She grinned. It's the end of February, and it's damn cold outside. Everyone who's plugged in is hanging out somewhere or staying home. I'm going to close right now. I can get away with it since I own the place. Give me 400, 3 for me, and 1 for my cook. Is there anything you need before I send him home? At that moment, my niece walked in, and with her a fellow. I almost didn't recognize her. She seemed to have really cleaned up her act. I immediately apologized. "I'm sorry, guys. If I had known you had plans, I never would have called you guys with me. I'm sure you'll think my wishes are crazy, but hear me out. First, let me tell you what happened." When I finished, they stared at me with open jaws. Nanette hissed indignantly. "Let me tell you, your wife, my aunt, left you alone in a club to spend the night with some superstar jock, and your friends covered for her while she backed out? What kind of assholes do you hang out with?" Those are uncharted waters for me. They're actually her friends, the ones she ran around with in high school and college. She was beyond thrilled when my company wanted to move me to this place. As we drove, she would show Chicago in her rearview mirror. I had been around them for a long time and thought we had the same outlook on life. I can assure you that we are no longer friends. Let me tell you what I want, and you tell me what an awfully bad idea it is and how much trouble I'll get in if I do it. I told them what I wanted, and Eric and Nanette looked at each other and then burst into laughter. When they came to their senses, Nanette asked Eric to get a black box out of the car. The black box turned out to be an unregistered laptop that she had slightly modified. "No one will be able to trace it. I'll call stations all over the world and I won't stay on hold for longer than half a second at anyone. I've been working on this since I was 13 and kept it a secret until I was of age and could get a patent on it. That explains a lot of why all these schools are out to get me, and the military offered me a very lucrative offer to skip college and go straight to work for them." Nanette asked all sorts of questions as she set everything up. "I got it," she exclaimed, showing me my wife's Facebook screen. "I'm in. Let the chaos begin." They scrolled through her posts, stopping to ask who the people were while Nanette made notes on her phone. When a picture of her best friend and the strange coordinator appeared on the screen, I almost lost my senses. Then a thought occurred to me and I gave her the names of my so-called friends who were with us. She had all the accounts up in a matter of minutes. Nanette grinned and looked at Dee. "She wants to show me something. Are you ready?" "Make it as disgusting as possible." Eric was silent for a moment. "Are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no turning back." You're throwing a grenade into your marriage. I'm sure. Ever since this started, I haven't thought about anything else. There's no way in hell I could live with her again. She threw a grenade. In response, I'm going into DEFCON 4 mode and considering nuclear options. Proceed. Nanette began typing, pretending to be my wife. Exciting news. I am proud to announce that I have officially joined the KCS, the Celebrity Club. It's her invention. Sounds lame and cool at the same time. I'm with Mark. I'm happy to say that he has a really tight end and can ram him when he finds a hole to slip into. I'm so proud that he picked me out of all the women in the club. Thank you to my friend for stepping in and talking to my husband while I slipped away. I'd say I owe you a debt of gratitude, but I've done the same for her before. Remember that girls' weekend in Atlantic City, D? You scored on a hockey player, and from what you said, he really knows how to score pucks. Ha ha ha. After that, Nanette mimed a bunch of smiley faces. Then she began again. Right now we're resting, so to speak, at halftime. We'll start the second half soon. Hopefully it will go into overtime. She then forged messages from all the women who were at the club, giving her literal high fives and telling her they couldn't wait for their time with the stud. Janie rebuked her husband for acting like an asshole on needles. He doesn't have to be rich. All he has to do is be high and last more than 5 minutes. She found some pictures of the asshole and posted them, along with some pictures of Linda. It was almost midnight, but the notifications were lighting up as people looked through the messages. Surely in her social circle, despite the late hour, phones were ringing. Then Nanette lit up Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I didn't bother with the calls because I was sure her phone was turned off, and I couldn't interfere with her plans. The comments started pouring in. Is this a joke? I bet your husband doesn't think it's funny. What the hell is going on with you? This was her favorite aunt speaking. I wondered to myself in bewilderment why she was still awake. Nanette replied, This is not a joke. I saw an opportunity and took it. How many can boast of having slept with someone famous? If you don't believe me, come to his house tomorrow around 10 o'clock. 130 Wyndham Circle. It's a goddamn mansion. The rich really are different. Maybe we'll be awake by then, and you can see my walk of shame as I walk out of his house. Or maybe it's a walk of fame? Another person joined the thread. I didn't know her, but it didn't matter. She had over 700 friends, and they were all on the rumor mill. Really? Are you proud of leaving your husband? Do you really think your marriage will survive this? I love my husband. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. And he loves me, so I know he'll get through this. There might be some hardship, but I'll do my best to spoil him and eventually he'll forgive me. It doesn't mean anything. It's just one night and I'll never repeat it. Really? Are you drunk? As for never doing it again, did you ever think you'd do it the first time? You're delusional. I'm giving up on you as a friend. Don't try to contact me. I hope in the light of day you still think it was worth it. It may be all you have left to hang on to. I finally recognized the name. It was her boss's wife. That gave me another idea, and Nanette posted the whole thing on the company page. I bet she's going to have some interesting conversations on Monday. Another person replied, It's all just nonsense, isn't it? If you think it's funny, you're wrong. Every word of it is true. We are going to be all right. I have faith in my husband. How did he believe in you? I think the only explanation is that you were hit by a Martian horror ray. I've seen some stupid decisions before, but this tops them all. It's almost on the level of a Darwin Award, but it usually ends in death. But perhaps the death of your marriage will vindicate you. I'm with Rosalind. I'm leaving you. Don't try to reply because you will be blocked. God help you. It was a letter from her first cousin. She lived in another state, and I wondered how long it would be before the rest of the family knew the details. Nanette looked sad. She had always liked Linda. You're destroying her, ripping the foundation of her life out from under her feet. Are you sure you don't want to stop? Not yet, no. I have a few more things to do and then I'm done with her. Literally. We sent messages to the team's website, the NFL office, charities, the mayor, the city council, all their official websites, and everyone we could think of. Nanette flooded Instagram and Twitter. The posts and comments were pouring in as fast as they could. Then she found his accounts and did the same. He was considered the model of an athlete involved in the community. He had 2 charities and was constantly doing some form of volunteer work. The team and the league loved him. It was time to bring the pain. Eric made inquiries and got the name and number of a sports reporter who, for some unknown reason, hated the guy. He was a little pissed at being dragged out of bed, but calmed down when I told him what I had. Eric installed a voice scrambler on my phone and I started talking like a woman. Stop whining. I'm giving you an opportunity. Mark is with a married woman right now. He knew she was married because she was with her husband when he pulled her out of the shadow lounge tonight. Looks like it wasn't the first time he'd done that. Talk to the bouncer if you don't believe me. Her name is Linda Hamilton. She's been married for 10 years, has 2 small children. So much for the NFL poster boy, huh? We found out later that he was furious because this man had pulled the same stunt on him. He and his wife had been at odds for almost a year before they reconciled, and she was still on shaky ground. Besides, it was the off-season. Not much was going on in local sports, and that probably made the story more appealing. To be honest, we sent letters to local TV stations and newspapers. I doubted anything would come of it, but Mark was well-known and very popular, and the Sharks had to smell blood on the water. By 6 in the morning, there were 2 vans, 1 regular reporter, and paparazzi at the gates of his upscale neighborhood. By 8, someone from the team or central office was knocking on his door. He'd open in his bathrobe, and cameras would point from vantage points the videographers had found. Luck wasn't on their side, because behind his back, Linda, also in a robe, was clearly visible. The cameras clicking frantically were clearly audible. His eyes widened at the sight of the reporters. The man stepped inside and slammed the door shut. The man must have told him the whole story, and Linda immediately opened her Facebook page. That house was a mansion of good brick and timbers, but the scream could be heard even beyond the gate. It was the scream of a mortally wounded animal. In a rage, she tried to close her account but found it locked. Nanette later counted them, and it turned out that in the first 6 hours alone, over 3,000 comments had appeared on all media platforms. Linda had never been more popular. At 10 o'clock, they finally left the house. Linda had her head covered, but everyone knew who she was. It was hard to believe she was being covered, but then again, he was a popular person and it was the weekend, so there wasn't much news. Now, she got into the unknown man's car and he drove around the house, pulling out of the driveway. This wasn't their first rodeo, and the paparazzi spotted the driveway as well. They even managed to get a clear shot of Linda as she drove by. The man drove her home, and I wondered what she thought about when she was alone. I picked up the kids from the babysitter and drove them to my parents' house. I wasn't surprised to see her parents there because we were all very close. Both mothers were Facebook friends, so they saw everything. But again, she wasn't alone. 4 cars were following her home, and now they had her address. She got out of the car and ran to the front door as the questions poured in on her. Was she his girlfriend now? Had she left her husband for him? Did your husband approve of this? It was a particularly stupid question, but it was asked often over the next few weeks. When I talked to her family, it was a little stressful. We know what she did. Everyone in the southern half of the country knows. We also know it wasn't her on Facebook. Judging by her actions, she's not that smart, but she was never suicidal. How could you do that to her? Ask her the same question and get back to me. I had no intention of keeping the kids from her, but I wanted a few days to pass and things to settle down. I stopped where Linda was unlikely to look for me, in the room we'd rented for our romantic affair. The receptionist looked at me strangely when he checked the records, but gave me the room for 3 days. It was pretty funny to run into my former friends leaving the hotel as I headed to my room to spend the night. I was on adrenaline and rage and had been awake for 30 hours by then. Dee rushed over to me. You bastard, do you realize how much you hurt Linda? It was all for nothing, just a fantasy she wanted to fulfill. She would have been the same when she got home. No, she was damaged. And when I have something damaged, I have 2 choices. I have to decide if it's worth fixing, and if I think the cost is too high or get rid of it. Linda has done a lot of damage to our marriage, and repairing it is not worth that emotional cost. I never slept with that hockey player. So you admit you dated him? From what I understand, you had dinner with him and then went to the dance. Even if you didn't sleep with him, it was a chance to fulfill a fantasy, wasn't it? Hubby will be upset if you tell him, but you can get him to forgive you, can't you? The rest of her group backed away, but at the mention of the hockey player, her husband burst forward. I'm going to kick your... As I told the bouncer, I don't fight fair, I fight to win. I kicked him right in the thigh bone, and while he was squirming in pain, I looked down and then at the cameras in the hall. It's all on tape, dude. Your attempt to attack me and my attempt to defend myself. Remember that as a life lesson and focus on what you're going to do with your bitch. I looked around at my former friends. I want you to remember this for the rest of your lives. I'll probably be divorced soon, but I'll bet good money I'm not the only one. You need to think about it and make some kind of decision. I'd wish you luck, but honestly, I hope your lives blow up as much as you helped blow up mine. Despite requests and then demands, I never slept in my old house again. Linda was very angry at first, not understanding why I was reacting that way. It just wasn't that big of a deal. Yes, she may have dumped me in the worst possible way and then spent the night having fun with a complete stranger, but that was all in the past and it was time to move on. He was famous, for God's sake. It was over now, so why not get back to normal? Truth be told, she'd been partial to the asshole since the days when we lived in Chicago and he played there. I used to watch the Bears sometimes, and Linda would watch with me. When the charity poster came out with him on the cover, wearing long knit shorts and nothing else, she bought one. It must have been a dream come true when he asked her to dance. When she realized I wasn't going to just trot home like a good boy, she got bitchy. When she was served with a divorce petition citing adultery as the reason, she became furious. Linda resorted to every threat she could think of, but I persisted. Linda threw herself on my mercy and was surprised that I had none. She was barely hanging on to her job. It was a long time before her boss told her not to do more than she had to, and even longer before his wife acknowledged her presence in the room. We were ordinary people, and it would have stayed that way if it hadn't been for the man she was having fun with. The paparazzi got to the bouncer and waved green under his nose until he sang like a canary. There were at least 3 other incidents at that club alone. Mark liked to party. A lot. I bet when he left Chicago, he soon wished he had signed with another team. The Panthers were a team from the Carolinas, and North Carolina is a state of alienating attachments. He should have picked a house outside the state line. My lawyer advised me not to pursue him until the divorce was finalized, but he, his team, and the NFL went into full defense mode. One evening, I opened the door of my new apartment and saw a man with a briefcase in his hands. "Sir, I'd like to talk to—" "Go away." I slammed the door shut and slid the deadbolt back into place. He pounded on the door so hard that I called the police and they politely asked him to leave. He looked at the security camera I had installed and shook his fist before leaving. I then got a call from the new owner of the team. He introduced himself, and before he could continue, I stopped him. "4 people in the world have my number. How did you get it?" He sighed. "Does it really matter? I hung up, went straight to the phone store and demanded a new number. It went on like that for 8 days before I got another call. "Sir, I represent the children's charity Go Deep. May I have a moment of your time?" "I'm sorry, but I already support 3 charities and don't have the funds to participate in another one. Have a good day." Wait. I'm not asking you for a donation. In fact, it's just the opposite. I'm willing to offer you a good amount of money." "Why do you want to give me money?" "Sir, the founder and main donor is Mark Lay." I hung up again and blocked his number. They recognized my new email address and sent me long emails about how my actions had hurt the charity and how donations had dropped so much. I couldn't help but respond and called them. "So it's my fault that the charity is suffering? How exactly?" "Your accusations against Mark have tarnished his reputation and are causing him unnecessary suffering. If you would publicly state that you forgive him and your wife for a momentary oversight and allow him to redeem himself, public interest in this case would diminish. Let me be clear. This man seduced my wife. In front of me and about 50 witnesses, and the low-level thug he was paying tried to stop me when I tried to go after them. She stayed the night. And while she won't admit to having sex with him, we all know that's what happened. Tell you what, have him publicly state that he had sex with my wife even though he knew she was married, and I'll think about it. That wouldn't be in anyone's best interest. Can't we convince you to leave sleeping dogs lying around? That old hound doesn't sleep. He's growling and foaming at the mouth, wanting to rip a piece out of someone's ass. I'll tell you what, let him donate all his money to a scientist to create a form of time travel, get back to my wife, and then we'll talk. In the meantime, if he thinks things are bad now, wait a few days, and don't ever contact me again." "What do you—" I spoke to Eric and Nanette complaining about not being able to turn off my cell phone. That gave them an idea, and they came up with an app that allowed them to do just that. It was an old-fashioned phone sound that you could use when you wanted to hang up. I bet a lot of telemarketers got an unpleasant surprise over the next few months. They patented it, or trademarked it, or whatever it was to keep other people from using it. They charged $1 a load and put me on the paperwork, saying that while it was their expertise, it was my idea. 33 cents wasn't much when you multiply it 50,000 times in just the first 2 months. Then, they turned into serious money. I used it to buy a real house, not the apartment I was living in. And the kids were happy. It broke my heart to leave them, but every time I looked at her, I wished I had killed her on the spot. The poor woman was deluded, seriously deluded. She thought I would just accept what she did and move on with my life. Her favorite refrain was, "It was one night." Yes, it was one night. One night is one night too many. Tell me the truth. You knew I'd never let it happen if I found out early enough. And that's why you got your slut girlfriends to step in so you could slip away with your man whore like a thief in the night, because that's exactly what you were. A thief. You stole our future that night, Linda. And you have no one to blame but yourself and your asshole. You think he's in pain? Hell no. He's not in pain. He's probably laughing about it as we speak. He doesn't care that he ruined a family. She odd. I almost never raised my voice in anger, and I certainly never said it to or in front of my children. Looking back, I don't think I ever did it toward her. Perhaps that was the problem. She thought I was weak and was afraid I would leave her. The kids didn't take to it very well. Eventually, I sent them to therapy, and it started to help. The therapist was careful not to belittle their mother, but she told them that their mother had made a very bad error in judgment and was now reaping the consequences. She invited us to attend a couple of sessions separately, and since I was paying, I got a summary of the sessions. She still denies her guilt and tells the children that, although she did something, it wasn't bad enough to divorce her because of it. Your little girl asked her what she did, and she told her that it was an adult matter and she would realize it in a few years. Your son is only 4 years old, but he memorizes everything he sees and hears in the media. She never answered his questions directly, just told him she made a terrible mistake and is trying her best to fix it. I don't think he believed that and has a strong dislike for his mother. I was asked the same questions at the session, and I answered them as honestly as I could. Yes, son, I am divorcing your mother because of what you have heard. She broke a promise and a commitment by acting this way. You know that when you promise something, you have to fulfill it. When you become an adult, things get a little deeper. She made these promises in front of 200 people, legally and spiritually binding. And she knew full well what would happen if she broke them. But she did it anyway. I still love your mom, but I don't trust her anymore. And trust is the key issue. Let's say I promised to pick you up from school on Wednesdays, and I did for a year. Then I missed one and left you where you were. I knew I should have picked you up but decided I was more interested in doing something else. How many times will you stand there waiting for me before you realize you can't trust me to pick you up? Would you believe me if I told you it wouldn't happen again? I think I was able to get through to them a little bit and follow the therapist's instructions exactly. I didn't say anything bad about their mother. I told them that although our relationship had changed, we both loved them very much. Other than that, I did not talk about their mother unless they brought it up themselves. Linda did the exact opposite. She told the kids that, yes, she made a bad mistake, but it wasn't bad enough to end the marriage. She told them that I was just being stubborn and things would get better. The therapist was beyond angry and in a meeting with her said, "How can you do this to your children? Your husband shows no desire for reconciliation. Moreover, in one of our sessions, he was talking to the children about divorce. They had enough classmates in the same situation to get a basic understanding of how things work. They had also watched enough of their parents' remarriages to realize that sometime in the future, there might be someone new in their lives. Your children believe, and I might add, quite rightly, that your relationship with your husband is over. I know you have had numerous conversations with him, but it hasn't helped, and I think I understand why. You still refuse to consider that you have done anything wrong, at least so wrong that you are willing to divorce because of it. I strongly encourage you to seek couples counseling. I don't believe it will help you reconcile, but it may lead to you being able to accept the status quo and move on. I will not be seeing you again. Thank you for visiting those I asked." Linda wasn't impressed by this, except for the remark about counseling. Her psychologist was pretty good, and the judge ordered 8 sessions. If after 4 sessions the therapist thought there was no progress, she could stop all further sessions. On the other hand, if she saw progress, she could add more sessions. My attorney tried to gag me, but I stood up and asked the judge if I could speak. He nodded, warning me to be polite. Your Honor, I need to be clear. I have no interest in a further relationship with my wife other than as joint parents of our children. With that in mind, I will attend sessions. But I absolutely refuse to attend more than 8 sessions. That should be enough to solve all of our problems. I'm serious, Your Honor. Yes, you can put me in jail, fine me, or do both if I refuse, but you have to think about this. This divorce is getting a lot of media attention, and I'm sure you don't want it to turn into a quagmire of mud, and I, for one, am more than happy to talk to the press. One more thing, Your Honor. I want her lover to attend one meeting and explain why he thinks sleeping with married women is a good idea, and why he thinks it shouldn't affect my marriage. Thank you, sir. My lawyer looked at me like I had grown 2 heads, and the judge looked like he didn't know whether to laugh or throw me under the bus. Linda looked like she was going to get physically sick any second, and her lawyer seemed to be trying to find something to object to. Finally, he banged the gavel twice. I don't have the authority to send him to marriage counseling if it's not his marriage. I'll draft a letter asking you to look into the matter, but I don't hold out much hope for that. Your attorney may tell you that it is perfectly legal to require him to appear in court, but that is up to your discretion. Counselors, provide a list of therapists or get one from the court, but I want all parties to agree and for sessions to begin in 2 weeks. I will also require the sessions to be twice a week. That way it will be over much sooner rather than later. If any of your clients miss a session, I will not threaten them with jail. I'll just declare the session invalid and they can't reschedule. Ordered. Bailiff, move on to the next case. Linda was not pleased. Not at all. She was waiting for me at the car with a determined look on her face. This has to stop. Please. This is not what I wanted at all. I thought it was a bad idea to talk to her without our lawyers present, but curiosity took over. Just for the sake of conversation, what did you think was going to happen? I thought you'd be angry, but love me enough to put up with it. It was just one night. All the years we've been together, our family, our kids, it wasn't worth throwing away for one night. It wasn't just one night. It was every night for the rest of our lives after that night. What you did was cold, calculating, and the ultimate in disrespect. You left me fooled in front of our supposed friends, and some of them even helped you slip out the back door like a whore. Before tonight, I would have bet my life that you loved me and our children, Linda. Not anymore. We're broken up, and all the counseling in the world won't fix that. I'll see you at the first session. Wait, I need a favor. What favor can you ask me? It's about Mark. Could you do him a favor? It's starting to affect his charity work. Think of the children. You mean you and he were thinking about ours last night? I don't care about his charity, and I promise you that very soon his charity will be the least of his problems. Won't you tell me how you know that? She had enough guilt to lower her eyes. He called me. Called you? How did he get your number? Her face reddened, and then it hit me. You gave it to him that night, didn't you? In case he wanted to repeat the performance? No, I don't know why I gave it to him, I just did. I should have known you wouldn't help. I just laughed and got in the car, marveling at how stupid she had become. While all of this was going on, I was being pressured to be reasonable. The league, the team, all the football-related organizations, charities, several sports talk shows, everyone was pressuring me to leave it alone. Even my boss, a big fan of the team, put a little pressure on me. In response, I found another job. I think he realized too late how I would react and how it would look to everyone else in our organization and the public. He tried to back down and keep me on the team, but it was too late. I wondered how angry he was about the complaint I had filed with corporate HR. I had a feeling his future was toast, and I assumed that wouldn't happen to a more deserving person. I felt so bad that I started writing down every conversation I had. I didn't do it the first few times, but then I started. And it led to some pretty short conversations. The sportscaster we called the night this whole mess started invited me on his radio show. It was his show, ranked #1 in listenership, and I posted some bombshells, snippets of conversations I'd had with various people. One of them that made a splash was a line about a team owner. He called, outraged, and threatened to sue me. The sports announcer did nothing but hold back from laughing. You can't see him, but my guest nods his head affirmatively. He doesn't even look impatient. Is there anything you want to say? He nodded as the microphone came on, and the first thing I did was laugh. What are you going to sue me for? For telling the truth? I checked, and in this state, it's perfectly legal to record your conversations without notifying the person you're talking to. It's called unilateral consent. Besides, I'm not going to use this conversation in any court case unless you insist on it. My attorney says we have every reason to charge you, the team as a whole, and the National League with harassment and unwarranted mental anguish. Do you have anything to say? He hung up. The program was picked up by several syndicated programs and it made national news briefly. I never heard another word from them. Mr. Mark found that the press ignored him unless someone wanted to ask about the divorce. He was used to being treated like a hero, to being the center of attention, and it was very frustrating for him. Even though his lawyers told him not to say anything and to be careful, he still snapped and did something stupid. He came after me at my house. When I bought my new house, the first thing I did was install a state-of-the-art security system. Ironically, it was the very system he had advertised in the company's commercials, and he was right. It was worth it. One night there was a knock on the door, and when I looked at my phone, the doorbell camera showed 3 very large men standing on the front porch of my house. They didn't look happy. I had my kids with me, so I pressed the silent alarm button, which automatically alerted the police. They called right away. You'd be surprised how many people set it off by accident. Sir, this is 911. Did you send out the alarm? Yes. There are 3 very large men standing on my porch. 3 men I don't know. 3 men who don't look happy. I didn't open the door and now they're pounding on it, demanding that I let them in. Sir, we have a car 4 minutes away. If you fear for your safety, don't open the door. I thanked them and waited 3.5 minutes before opening the door, making sure the storm door was locked. What can I do for you? Mark sent us to reason with you. You will immediately drop all legal action against him. And if I don't? Then we will teach you a lesson in cooperation. Gentlemen, you are trespassing. Please leave the premises immediately. The largest of them sighed. Well, boys, it looks like this man needs convincing. When he ripped the door off its hinges, it could have been made of styrofoam. They were about to enter when a voice sounded behind them. Police, stop immediately and turn around with your hands up. If looks could kill, they wouldn't have to touch me to get what Mark wanted. The big guy looked like he was about to get into a fight, but his buddies talked him out of it. Pretty soon they were all on the ground with handcuffs on their hands. The sergeant took my report from me and after reviewing the records, charged them all with trespassing. I later learned that the punishment for trespassing was much more severe. The difference was that trespassing is usually spontaneous and usually has no serious criminal intent. On the other hand, if you come onto someone's property on purpose to cause them harm, that's a whole different category. It turned out that one worked at the stadium as a keeper and the other was just a friend of the third. He was on the team's practice squad, but he was immediately expelled. Apparently, Mark had promised him a spot on the team if he did him that favor, even though he had no authority to do so. The rest of them got $1,000 each. It cost Mark a lot more because he had to pay the lawyer's bills. I don't know how much it cost him, but they all pleaded guilty and got a huge fine that Mark had to pay. He had to go to court for setting it all up, and even his hero status couldn't save him. His lawyers managed to reduce the case to a misdemeanor. He had to pay a $5,000 fine and do 200 hours of community service. TMZ captured a video of him in an orange vest picking up trash on a highway. The video hit YouTube and racked up 600,000 views in the first week. Linda was quickly becoming the most expensive woman he had ever gone after. Some fans turned against him, and although it wasn't seen on TV, there were signs in the stands as the new season began. It was affecting his play, and one group put up a large banner. Put someone's wife on the goal line. It will make him focus. Of course, stadium security made them take the banner down, but it was too late. Within 3 hours, the video went viral and racked up 750,000 views in the first 2 days. Mark went from being a franchise player to getting little playing time, and one of his sponsors scrapped a campaign he had started until things settled down, which meant never. The law of averages caught up with me one evening. They came out of nowhere, 4 of them. They beat the shit out of me, and I ended up with 2 broken fingers on my hand, a broken leg, a cracked cheekbone, and bruised ribs. These guys knew what they were doing because it all happened in about 90 seconds. I don't know how much damage they would have had time to do if it hadn't been for a coworker who came out of the office right after me. When he yelled, they demonstrated their professionalism by immediately running away. 10 minutes later, I was in the ambulance, and another hour later, I was in the room where they had left me overnight for observation due to a concussion. My head was splitting, I was falling and passing out. One day I woke up and thought I saw Linda sitting up, but then I briefly lost consciousness. When I woke up again, I was alone. It was 7 days before I was able to return to work. Police obtained several surveillance tapes from several businesses across the street, but none of them showed anything identifiable. The police officer who took my statement gave me some advice. If you've been in contact with anyone lately, tell me. These guys were professionals. They avoided cameras as much as possible, wore big hats and loose clothing, so we don't have faces or anything recognizable like tattoos or scars. I told him my sad story. I was told that when questioned, he laughed and admitted that he didn't like me, but that he wasn't involved in the attack. They didn't believe it for a minute, but they had no proof. I had to give up weekends with the kids. I wasn't in the best physical shape and didn't want them to see me until the bruises came off. Linda was horrified at what had happened, but agreed. She even offered to come over and help. I politely declined. The counseling session dragged on, as it usually does. It was a wash, rinse, repeat cycle that went on for 4 sessions before even the therapist got bored with it. On the 5th session, she asked us not to interrupt her during the conversation. We've reached an impasse, and frankly, I don't think we'll ever get past it. Linda, you refuse to admit that what you did was wrong by conventional standards, and you refuse to think that should stop your marriage. And me. You left your husband in the middle of a club and then, poof, you left to spend the night with another man. You did it completely unannounced and took advantage of your friend so he wouldn't stop you. Tell me, if he had done that to you, left you standing in the middle of a public place surrounded by your so-called friends who were complicit in the deception, would you sympathize with him? Judging by your actions and communication here, I highly doubt it. Wait a minute. Don't say it. Think about it while I talk to your husband. She turned to me with an expression of sadness on her face. You'll never get her back. That's as clear as the nose on your face. From the way you and I have interacted, it goes without saying. I understand, I really do, but let me ask you this. Until she left the club with another man, you loved her. She was faithful and steadfast all those years. Your wife says it was a one-time act that even she doesn't understand, but it was important enough to jeopardize her marriage. She swears she has put it out of her mind and will never do anything like it again. Is there anything left in you ready to try again? I'll let your wife speak first. Please don't interrupt. You will say your word afterward. Agreed? She nodded to Linda, and we waited a minute while she gathered her thoughts. You know, you've talked a lot about how I have little remorse for my actions. I am remorseful. Very remorseful. I never thought it would hurt our marriage until I got divorced. I knew I hurt you badly and I knew you would be angry, but I never thought you would react the way you did. I am terribly sorry that my actions hurt you, and I can assure you in the strongest possible terms that I will never do anything like that again, especially now that I know the price of such actions. I ask you, even if you don't forgive me completely, to come home and let me make things right. She seemed satisfied with her speech and looked at me expectantly. You can say whatever you want, Linda, but on some level you knew how much what you did hurt us. You knew I wasn't some passive guy who would just brush it off and say, well, it's just one time and she says she won't do it again. Bullshit. If I did that, you'd lose all respect for me and probably wouldn't actively seek her out. But if another opportunity presented itself, you'd run away like a bastard knowing I'd forgive. I don't do that now, and I will never allow myself to be in a situation where I have to forgive again. Aside from the blatant disrespect you showed, the destruction of trust in my marriage topped it all off. Even before I left, if you had been gone for more than 30 minutes, I would have wondered if you were having fun with him or someone else. Let me make this as clear as I can to you. We're not staying married. I'm divorcing you. You can drag this out, use every delaying tactic you can, but eventually the court will get tired of it all and it will happen. Please don't put it off. I looked at the counselor. Are we done? She sighed. Yes, I will file my report with the court no later than Wednesday, say the marriage is irretrievably broken, and recommend that they grant the divorce. No, I'm not giving up. Please, darling, think of the children. I'm thinking about the children. I think about them every day they're gone. Tell me, Linda, if the kids were so important to you, how many times did you think about them while he was shaking the crap out of you in his mansion? Was the trip worth it? For you, maybe. For the rest of your family, who have yet to live in the real world, not so much. Face it, Linda, you screwed up. Pun intended. See you in court. I think the consequences of her action eventually caught up with her. In the end, everyone was just tired. Her lawyer was tired. My lawyer was tired. The judge was exhausted. One of the bailiffs looked like he had aged 5 years since the trial started. After the therapist report, the judge cut short another attempt to stall for time and declared us divorced. Linda walked out of court without saying a word, and my attorney only grinned when I asked the question. Now? He grinned a wild grin worthy of a rabid mountain lion. Yes, now. The next day, Mr. Mark was sued for alienation of affection. He didn't have to sign with the Panthers or buy a house in North Carolina. I'm told his outrage was epic. He can't do that. His lawyer sighed. Unfortunately, he can. It's still in effect in North Carolina. Before you start talking, yes, it's an archaic law that should have been repealed years ago. Most states have done so. Unfortunately, this is not one of them. My advice is to settle the case as quickly as possible and put it behind you. The bad publicity could cost you more than the settlement. Everyone in his orbit called. His lawyers called, the heads of his charities called, team representatives called, even the NFL commissioner, all begging me for an out-of-court settlement. The offers kept getting higher and higher, and even my lawyer told me I should accept, but I refused. It didn't matter that I wouldn't get anything. What mattered was that I could sling it in the mud. The investigators my lawyer hired got the bouncer and the team leader to admit that they were paid to help them accomplish their goals. Mark tried to avoid appearing in court, but since he had to testify several times, there was no choice. One of the sessions fell on a Friday, and he tried to excuse himself by saying he had to fly to another city that day to prepare for a rare Saturday game. Judge was not a football fan. Take a later flight and be in that courtroom tomorrow. I think he put us on the agenda as late as possible just to annoy him. The man had charm, and his lawyers tried to recruit a jury of women. But my lawyer was smart enough to outsmart them a few times. They recruited 7 women, but 3 of them were over 50 and happily married. 1 was a lesbian, 2 were young and single, and the last was a blonde who had just recently divorced. 2 of the men were young and single, and the other 3 were married and middle-aged. At first, he said he had never seen her, and they went down the path of shame, so he had to admit that she had been in his house. Then he started denying they had sex and said he was trying to protect her from her abusive husband. Linda decided that if she described her experiences in a letter, I would better understand her thoughts, and since the letter was written to me and in my possession, we were able to present it in court. No one believed the ploy with the abusive husband. The final nail in the coffin lid was Linda's court appearance. She said everything, even how many times she'd slept with him. I had no idea. She had listed 3 or 4 in the letter, but it was actually 5. The jury was out for less than an hour before they came back with a verdict. Part of the trial was full financial disclosure, and I think everyone in the courtroom was amazed at how much he was worth. He had played in the NFL for 7 years and had amassed a fortune of $96 million. I thought my lawyer was going to faint when I was awarded about a third of that amount. $30 trillion, 000, 000, 000, 000, 000, 000, 000, 000, 000, 000, 000. It was the highest award in state history, but it was in line with what other spouses were getting. Previously, the highest award was $8.8 million. The laws were recently changed, but they still allowed up to 1/3 of the defendant's assets to be paid. Of course, when this was passed, it is unlikely that anyone thought that a case with that amount of millions would ever arise. There were several proposals in the state legislature to repeal the law, but they didn't make it through committee. I was lucky. His lawyers pouted their lips and tried to appeal, secretly urging him to take the deal and be done with it. They filed a notice of intent to appeal, but dropped it a month later and accepted the court's decision. Apparently, there was a loophole in the law. If the defendant's fortune increased during the appeal and he still lost, the amount of the deal was adjusted accordingly. A couple months later, a huge contract payment was waiting for him. The day after receiving the award, my attorney handed him 4 more lawsuits from married couples and divorced men and women. Of those 4 couples, 2 were divorced, one marriage was still on shaky ground, and another couple turned out to be swingers and thought he had chosen her. But when the proposal train pulled out of the station, they jumped on board. The divorced wives, including Linda, filed separate lawsuits. I'd already gotten a big piece of the pie, plus the seduction happened years ago, and they settled out of court quickly, getting $4 million each. Still, the son of a bitch was left with tens of millions. The saga wasn't over yet. It turned out that he was having an affair with the wife of one of his teammates and had a one-night stand with another. It was a little fact that investigators learned about, and I was happy to share it. During the next outing, several players either fell or blocked in the wrong direction, and he took 3 hits, the last of which took him out of the game through concussion protocol. There could be no excuses, but everyone realized that his continued play as a member of the Panthers made no sense. He was traded to Green Bay, where he played well but not spectacularly. His earnings took a big hit when the Panthers refused to pay him his contract money, citing a morals clause. He had to settle for 20% of what he could have earned. Green Bay signed him to a 1-year contract, and when it expired, refused to pay him what he wanted, and he went to Denver on another 1-year contract for $4 million. He played at full strength, and after his contract expired, some teams were interested enough to offer him a contract, but at a much lower salary. He ended up signing a 2-year contract with Cincinnati at a salary of $2.5 million. The contract had strict morals clauses, including forfeiting everything he had earned to date if he was caught in compromising conditions. While his play wasn't bad, it didn't match his prime, and he wasn't offered a new contract when his current one expired. He was already 34 years old, decrepit and suffering from constant injuries, so he retired and had a radio show with the Bengals for 2 years. After that, he became a nobody. Bastard still had a fortune of about $50 million, which was about a third or less of what he might have had if not for lawsuits and bad publicity. The last they heard of him, he had bought 2 car dealerships in California and was up to his old tricks again. One of the spouses took it personally, and Mark walks with a pronounced limp. I doubt he has learned anything. I saw a picture of him in a sports magazine, something like Where Are They Now?, where he was pictured at the opening of the 3rd dealership. He had a pretty good spare tire, and he shaved his head when he started going bald. Nevertheless, all those millions in his glory days would probably still attract the ladies. I thought about forwarding the article to Linda. Linda would get half of everything we had saved and could keep the house until the last child turned 18. Then she could buy it or we'd sell it and split the profits. She also received child support equal to my former salary. They were still my children, so if they needed anything extra, they got it. I bought her a new SUV because her car was totaled and she hadn't gotten a payout yet. My kids needed reliable and safe transportation. I often wondered if the fact that I got all those millions just because she was a woman and she didn't have access to any of it was hindering her. Linda wasn't completely destitute. She was eventually compensated by her lover, and since Nanette and Eric had come up with an app based on my idea while we were still married, she got half of my share. The app was very popular for years, especially when they added the ability to talk when it slams. The most popular were "Go to hell," "Kiss my ass," and "Don't ever goddamn call me again." They cost $5 apiece. Her paycheck was about $30,000 a year for about 3 years, after which the method stopped being popular and the payouts got much smaller. I didn't need them, but I put my share into the kids' college fund, and when they got older I told them that every time they heard that, their college fund got bigger. One day I calculated it as accurately as I could. As a result of the lawsuits, loss of a lucrative contract and publicity, reduced payouts, and Mark's shortened career, he probably lost between $110 and $170 million, making Linda one of the most expensive whores in history. Everyone should be famous for something, I guess. Dee divorced less than a year after us. Janie and her husband lived another 18 months before going their separate ways. Those whose wives had already cheated divorced before my divorce became final. As far as I know, the rest remained couples. I didn't care. After that last morning, I never spoke to them again. 6 years passed, and every once in a while I would wake up and reach for Linda, usually after I had a dream about how we were before that incident. I didn't remarry, I was still a little shy around women, but I started dating. I was surprised by the number of women who wanted a deeper relationship until I realized they had my money in mind. This made me extremely wary. Both kids are now very into soccer. My son does it mostly for friends and fun, but my daughter takes it very seriously and is quite talented. Her best friend plays a little better than she does, and I got to know her and her mom through all these sleepovers. Scarlett was wayward and not very confident due to being bullied by her psychopath ex. I learned from her daughter that she was tight on money because her ex disappeared and stopped paying child support. Without saying a word to her, I found him and arrested him for failure to pay child support. He had a good job, and the judge ordered him to pay all debts within 2 years or go to jail. With that, the payments doubled every month and they were able to breathe easier. I never told her I was the one who found him. Scarlett smiled more, stopped slouching, and got a new closet. The change was amazing, and guys started hitting on her, especially after she started wearing those tight shorts to games and practices. By then, she was getting comfortable with me, and I became her shield. The girls used to put us together all the time. I don't know when it happened, but we often held hands when the girls dragged us to their events. They ended up staying overnight with us often, with the girls sharing a room and Scarlett using the guest room. My money allowed me to buy a very nice house. It was situated on 40 acres of hills and lowlands, had a pond, a 10-acre pasture, and a 6-stall barn. The previous owners were horse lovers. It wasn't long before the house was filled with horses. I approached the idea with some apprehension. I hadn't had much interaction with horses, and their size, as well as their large teeth, frightened me. Scarlett laughed softly. She had grown up on a farm and had always had a horse when she was little. After 5 months, I gave in and instructed her to find horses for the kids, including her, and one for herself. I would pay all expenses, and she would only have to teach the children how to ride and care for them. I'll pay, but I'll be damned if I'm going to be shoveling shit. There was a lot of grumbling, but Scarlett stood her ground. Either they take care of their animals or we get rid of them. I don't know when exactly we started making decisions about kids together, just that Scarlett took the lead and I followed her lead. That Christmas, Scarlett bought me a horse, a big pinto with a sly twinkle in his eye. It took a lot of begging, and finally Scarlett declared that if I didn't start riding with them, she would stop spending time with me. This sent the children into a panic. The girls had reached the age where their bodies were beginning to change, and they voiced all their fears and concerns to her. My son obviously missed his mother figure very much. He had a lot of problems during the divorce, and Scarlett seemed to be a calming factor. I learned to ride and eventually started shoveling horse shit. Scarlett had us put the waste in a pile, and after it matured, she would use it for compost in her garden. I'm not sure exactly when I agreed to a vegetable garden, but one day we were buying a cultivator and hand tools. She tried to operate the cultivator, but the big machine was bouncing around. When I finished laughing, which irritated her unspeakably, I took over the controls. After the plot was tilled and leveled, she could operate it, but if she wanted to expand the plot, which happened twice, I took over again. The children helped because she told them that if they didn't, they wouldn't be able to eat what would grow. Then she told them the story of the red hen. They thought it was funny, but they got the point. We had just taken the girls to soccer camp, and I asked her if she thought she would ever start dating again. Wasn't she tired of being single? Her face turned red and had a "you really don't like what's going on" expression on it, but then she started laughing. I'm dating. He's a pretty nice guy, even if he's oblivious to the world around him most of the time. Jealousy shot through me like lightning. She saw it and grinned. I'm dating you, silly. How many times have we gone out to eat, to the movies, or on field trips with the kids? I don't know why I even keep an apartment. We're with you 5 days a week as it is. But it's just family stuff. You're absolutely right. I'd paint you a picture, but I'm afraid you'd break down trying to figure it out. It's family stuff because we've become a family. Your kids already call me mom when you're not around, and Kelsey plans to take you to school on Father-Daughter Day. It's a good thing she's at a different school now, or there would be a major scheduling conflict. By then, she was already holding my hand. It's a good thing your son went to science camp. I'm in love with you, honey, and have been for a long time. I respect your position because I know your ex has caused you a lot of pain, but tell me, when was the last time you were with another woman? You can't, can you? Maybe because you have feelings for someone but were afraid to tell her? That's going to change today. It's time to make a decision. If you want me, turn right toward your house. If not, turn left and take me to my apartment. The choice is yours. Just at that moment, we pulled up to an intersection. I fiddled with the signal a bit and grinned. Check it out. I think the left turn signal is broken. I'd better turn right then. Wouldn't want to provoke a collision. Her smile outshone the sun. Oh, there will be a collision. A big one. The kids will probably hear everything in their camps. Now hurry up. Let's go home. Before we turned into our driveway, I grinned. Good thing I bought a house with extra bedrooms. Kelsey will be able to choose one of them. Her grip on my arm nearly cut off my circulation. That won't be necessary. The girls have already decided to share a room, at least for a while. I'm sure they'll want their own bedrooms later, but right now they're together. And who knows, we might need an extra bedroom someday. As soon as the garage door closed, we pressed against each other for a few minutes. When we finally pulled away, she took my face in her hands and looked into my eyes. You don't talk about it, but I know what happened to your first wife. I just want you to know that I don't really enjoy the club life, but when I indulge in it, I indulge completely. I don't have much, but I have honor. And I swear to you that in a future relationship, I will never do anything like that, ever. I promise. Is that enough? I looked into those soulful, loving eyes and smiled. Enough. Later, she offered to sign a prenup, but after my outburst, she only chuckled and never brought it up again. For a while, Linda had a very difficult time. The repercussions of the public communication with me and the lawsuit about the breakup of the relationship, which has not come off the pages of the newspapers for several weeks, haunted her like a stray dog begging for a handout. She quit her previous job, saying her luggage was too heavy to carry every day. Financially, she was in good shape thanks to her piece of the Mark Pie, so she took her time and didn't work for almost a year. She then took a job at a small firm just starting out. She did her research and invested $1 million in the startup, taking a 10% stake in the company. A year later, she was promoted and the company began to expand. I researched them more out of idle curiosity than anything else, and while they had a good product and a good business plan, they were seriously underfunded. I discussed this at length with my investment managers, and when they went public, quietly invested $5 million in our children's names and gave Linda proxies to vote. Despite what she did to me, she always looked out for her children's best interests. As a result of the purchase, she became the controlling partner. When it became necessary to split the business, she was promoted to vice president of sales and production. Linda worked 50 hours a week or more, but seemed to be thriving, plus the children were often at my house and excited to see their younger brother. Scarlett was 6 years younger and told me that one of the conditions of marriage was to have at least one child. Daniel Brock, that was his grandfather's name, was almost 2, and I was even glad the older kids liked him so much because it gave Scarlett a break every now and then. The first thing she did was, at my insistence, change careers and become a stay-at-home mom. It was a full-time job. You had to keep up with 3 teenagers and a 2-year-old. I still don't sleep well, and sometimes I open my eyes in the middle of the night and think about where I would be now if Linda hadn't cheated. Then I noticed something. If I got up to get a drink or go to the bathroom, Scarlett was restless when I returned, but as soon as I lay down and touched her, she immediately fell into a deep sleep. Often, I woke up to the fact that she was lying almost on top of me. It was like she wasn't happy and didn't feel safe unless we had physical contact. I also realized that we often held hands when we walked or went shopping, except when one of us needed to take the kids. Then, her hand was back in mine. I searched my memory. Linda usually slept as far away from me as possible, claiming she was too hot to be comfortable. We were at our son's high school graduation. Scarlett went to take pictures with his friends. Linda's new husband went with her because his son and ours were great buddies, and that's what initially brought them together, as it did Scarlett and me. They had been married for 3 years now and seemed happy. She looked at me with sad eyes. Can we talk for a minute? Sure, about what? I need to give you something 12 years late. To apologize, it took me about 4 years and several therapy sessions to really understand what I did to you and the pain you went through. If anything, I am sorry. Even today, I can't tell you why I did it and thought it would be okay. And this is after years of counseling. For years, I was so angry at you for divorcing me that I couldn't think straight. In my warped view of reality, it wasn't a big deal. I had a chance to sleep with someone famous, and I took it without a second thought. You should have been proud of me. I looked at her and she smiled. I know. Reality didn't come for a long time. Then, after about 2 years of therapy, my counselor asked me who was on your list of celebrities. Remember, all the people we would sleep with if we were single and had the chance. I immediately thought of Anne Hathaway. Still in love with her? I grinned. Yeah, I like her. I think she's gotten even better looking as she's gotten older. Then my psychologist asked me how I'd feel if we were at a premiere or something, and you had the opportunity to sleep with her. You had someone distract me, and then you left with her. And then you came home, pretended it was no big deal, and wondered why I was so upset. I laughed at first. He would never do anything like that to me, I told her. And then she made me think about it as if it had really happened and the whole world knew about it. I closed my eyes and replayed the whole thing in my head. I was almost in a rage imagining it. That's when the breakthrough happened. As angry as I was at you in fantasy, I actually did the exact same thing to you in reality, and nothing could change that. So here's my apology. I behaved wrongly, and you had every reason to divorce me. If you had left with Anne, I would never have believed you again, no matter how many times you professed your love for me and swore it would never happen again. If I had known then what I know now, I would have laughed in his face when he asked me to dance. I thought about that for a minute. Thank you, Linda. In a way, it makes me feel a little better. I thought about it as I walked away. The water through the dam is not recycled. Burned bridges are very hard to rebuild. You take what life throws at you and do the best you can with what you have. With Linda, I had a lot, but with Scarlett, I have everything. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for the next videos.